May I invite first Dr. Mukesh Aghi, who is joining from Washington on a cold Washington morning. Uh, Dr. Mukesh Aghi is the President and Chief Executive of the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum. In his current role, he works extensively with business and government leaders in the US and India to promote trade and strengthen ties between the two countries. He has over 20 years of success empowering business expansion globally, boosting revenue, and increasing margins for companies in a variety of sectors. He was recognized by Square Magazine as a global leader and has won many awards over the course of his professional career. If I go on reading out his bio, it will take a few minutes, so I'll stop here. And with these words, I would like to invite Dr. Aghi to speak on the future trajectory of India-US economic partnership. And the most important issue right now, which is exercising the minds of people here, uh, the two issues. One is, of course, the trade issue. That is, will Trump club India with the rest of other countries and impose additional tariffs? What would that mean? Has India got a strategy in place? And when we look ahead, for long we have spoken about $500 billion trade target, which continues to remain elusive, although the trade is on an upswing. And maybe you also like to address the big issue, which is being talked about hysterically, about the H-1B visa. If Trump lives up to his word, it would be a huge, it could possibly be a huge embarrassment for India, the Indian government, as he decides to back off illegal immigrants, including Indians. So over to you, Mr. Aghi, to speak. You have 10 minutes or so.
Well, thank you very much, Manish, and good morning to and good evening to everybody. We have a administration coming in which is focus on how to make America great again. And in fact, yesterday there was an announcement from the incoming administration. Instead of having internal revenue services, they also announced external revenue services. That means how do you collect money from other countries as you basically do business with the United States? Now, what we have is a scenario where you will see a lot of glass being broken, norms being challenged, and a sense of unpredictability in an environment which is already very, very turbulent. So we do expect certain challenges as we go into the new administration. Now, with in regards to India and the US, you have two countries where the trade is crossed around $200 billion. India has a surplus of around $45 billion itself. But more important is that two countries geopolitically, they are very much aligned in every aspect, vis-a-vis especially in Indo-Pacific and specifically towards China. And what more important is you also have a roughly 5 million Indian Americans, which make around 1.5% of the population, but they're generating roughly around 6% of the GDP. So you do have a large number of professional Indians whose per capita income is twice the average itself. Then you also have roughly 1.1 million H-1B visa holder which have applied for green card, and that will take decades for them to get the green card to be a residency here permanently itself. So we have what I call is, and something very interesting is there was a report published yesterday talking about how nations have looked at Trump administration and especially Trump as a leader and his approval rating. India was one country which he got the highest approval rating. It was in the high 70s itself, more than the US also. So what we are seeing is a interlink between the actual trade taking, interlink between the migration mobility itself, and also the opinion. But you also have to understand Indians are the third largest illegal migrant into the US. And roughly 150,000 have gone through the legal process, just like another 900,000 of the other countries' illegal migrant, which are going to get deported. And I think that's where you will see a challenges coming in, because the two top countries, Mexico and El Salvador, are kind of at the moment reluctant to take back, whereas India has proactively taken the approach. Yes, we will take back our citizen. Let's make sure that we have a proven process to ensure they are from India, and no issue taking them back. So I think that process has already begun. But more important is, let's talk about from a geopolitical perspective. Uh, yes, there is a thaw in discussion between India and China. There is a thaw as far as the investment goes, which needs to come into India from China. India's trade deficit with China is the highest itself, and India needs to get Chinese investment to come in, if nothing else, produce capital goods for further manufacturing itself. And what we have seen in the case of Apple, that's a prime example. If you are focused, define your policies towards a sector and a company, you can drive a incremental growth itself. Today, Apple is exporting roughly 25% of iPhone 16 from India. It has basically planned to, in partnership with Flex, and is a contract manufacturer, roughly 200,000 employees. And what more important is it is gaining share of the domestic market. Its revenue on India has crossed $5 billion. So while India can be challenging from a China plus one strategy, but what we are seeing is the opportunity for these companies to come in and not only set up manufacturing in India, but gain also the domestic market share. So coming back to the Trump administration, I think it is important to understand that what India has to do is work closely. And what we have seen is, yes, you have policy, but you look at the appointments of Senator Mark Rubio, or Congressman Mark Waltz, or John Radcliffe, for the CIA director. They all seem to be China hawks itself. So I think that's where India has to basically leverage the national security angle and drive the economic agenda. And that's where we have recommended to the new administration to take the Quad partnership between the four countries, which is Japan, Australia, India, and the US, and somehow percolate that into an economic partnership and energy partnership. When you look at the four countries' GDP, it's roughly around $35 trillion. When you look at the FTA between US and Japan, it exists. FTA between US and Australia, it exists. India's partnership with Japan and some kind of trade agreement, it does exist. It's the same with Australia. So what's lacking is a trade agreement between India and the United States. And I think that's where I think India has to take a very proactive role and say, okay, number one, we are willing to work a comprehensive trade agreement. If you don't want to do a direct trade agreement, let's focus on doing a FTA between the four countries and create a common market, because you already have a security dialogue taking place and other partnership on the Indo-Pacific. And so you can drive also economic agenda in that arena also. So that's going to be very critical on part of India to be proactive on the FTA. Second would be is it is important to basically for Trump administration to deal with the illegal immigration. And I think that's where India can proactively say, okay, we understand this is a process. We will identify the illegal Indian migrants and take them back. That kind of takes off a lot of pressure from Trump administration, while other countries may push back from that perspective. So we are very optimistic that the relationship between India and the US will continue in a positive trajectory. The trade will go. The investment from US companies, we are seeing momentum picking up substantially itself. But more important is the H-1B visa issue is going to get a little more explosive as you look at the I call the MAGA rights and the tech Republicans who are going to put a big fight in this area itself. But I think more important, I believe, is that H-1B is critical for U.S. companies. We have seen the data. For every 10 H-1B workers are rejected from granting the status, 9 jobs leave the country. For every 10% rejection, it has an impact of $85 billion on the US economy itself. But overall, we are very optimistic about this relationship. I believe there's room for improvement, but the intent and the direction is right. So on that note, I'd like to close here, Manish.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your views and that unmistakable note of optimism in your assessment, despite what skeptics say, the economic relationship is set for an upswing.